What can I say to you that I believe may be a word from God to you at this point in your lives? First of all, remember your baptism. With your baptism, God said to you the eternal truth. You are God's child, God's beloved, and God is very pleased with you. And you can't change that. Ever. That is the eternal truth. Now, out of that truth comes a word of grace that Jesus spoke in his Sermon on the Mount when he said, "Be not anxious about tomorrow. Live today, dwell in God's presence, grace. Tomorrow will have its own worries." Now, I know what I'm saying to you, I have trouble trusting for myself. I'm a worrier. I'm a fretter. I get anxious. I can't sleep at night. I know what it's like to worry. And Jesus says, don't. Trust. Trust that as God's grace was sufficient to St. Paul, it'll always be sufficient for you, no matter what. John, do you have that passage from Corinthians? Paul is praying to God. He has something's wrong. He calls it a thorn in the flesh. And he prays that God will take it away, that God will heal it, whatever it might be, because he believes that without it, his witness will be more effective. And so he prayed, not once, not twice, 3 times, and nothing happens. He doesn't get what he wants, what he feels like he needs in order to be useful to God. And God says, my grace is sufficient for you. And what you think is a liability, because of my grace, it'll become an asset in your witness to me. I know right now you're being told, follow your dreams, write a script for your life. Don't let anything stand in the way of your fulfilling that script. And I say, amen, go for it. But sometimes, as they say, life happens. And that script has to be rewritten, not because necessarily of anything you do, but just because. And at that point, you're faced with, am I going to be resentful and bitter and angry because life isn't turning out the way I want it to? Or am I going to trust that God has in mind for me something that may not be what I had in mind initially, but maybe even better for me and for God's will and its fulfillment in the world? Paul says in his Roman letter, all things work together for good for those who love him. Sometimes it's really hard for us to believe that. And as I thought about how can I prove to you that's true? That promise God keeps? I thought of those persons in our congregation who our experience is, even though their situation isn't what they would have it to be, it does seem like God's using it for our good. I think of Ken Hostetler, back in the wheelchair, Crohn's disease. I think of Donna Sloan, stroke, and yet she calls many of us on our birthdays. I think of those persons whose lives haven't followed the script they would have written, but God has been with them. And then I thought about someone whom I knew when he was your age. His name is Dylan Brown. And I've asked Dylan to tell his story. I've not heard it. But the fact that he is here today, doing what he's doing today, for me is proof that God keeps that promise that all things work together for good for those who love him. And as Dylan, will you come down now? And John, will you show, some of you probably have had your parents do a video of you, like this video you're about to see of Dylan.
That you can live by, and because the past is just a goodbye to you.
Brown.
Dylan, Paul's going to raise his hand. Paul was just selected all district. Dylan was all tournament team for the AAA championship. Moved in the middle, Dylan. Can you spot? Can you spot Dylan? Is your green light? Yeah, your green light's on.
Can y'all hear me?
He's using Bucky's wireless. All right. I've
Thank you, Mike.
never heard Dylan speak, but again, his very presence reveals to me that God keeps God's promises for grace to be sufficient no matter what happens. Dylan?
Yes,
Welcome.
sir. Well, thank you, guys. It's an honor to be here, and I'm very, very blessed that Mike reached out to me to come talk to you guys today. Just watching that, honestly, I don't have to watch it. I think about that all the time. And if I could put things into perspective for you guys, especially you graduating seniors, I'm 35 years old now, and I can promise you that it was just yesterday that I was there. And I can tell you what my motivating factors in life were at that time were pretty much very, very centered around what I could do athletically, what I could do appearance-wise, and so on. Was almost single-mindedly obsessed with that senior season playing soccer because we had come so close my sophomore year and my junior year just to come up a little bit short. And those guys that were on the team with me that were juniors and seniors the years before me, I looked up to them with all my heart. They hung the moon for me. And so for us to come up so close and yet come up short for those 2 years before my senior year, I had a single-minded focus that senior year where we were going to accomplish that. And I had great confidence. I had faith in myself. I had faith in the guys that I grew up with and that we could accomplish that. So, but I knew that if I put every single bit of my focus and desire on that, I knew that we could do that. And so at the time, I was really, 100% focused on making sure that I was in shape, making sure that I had everything lined up, making sure that I didn't make mistakes or that my mistakes didn't cost me the ability to play. So I make sure I walked the line as best of my ability. If some, and I know you guys don't know me too well, but I was full of spirit. Full of spirit then, still full of spirit. Thank the Lord, honestly. But the gifts that I had then, as it turns out, still serve me well to this day. At the time, I probably was thought I was pretty darn fast. I was pretty strong. I had the will to win and so on. But as it turns out, the greatest strength that I had as my role as a part of that team was my ability to speak, my ability to look at people in the eyes, my teammates and those around me, and know that I didn't even understand where it came from or anything. I knew that I had a strong mom that put a lot of faith and confidence in me and always expected me to have the ability to go out and reach people. And it was second nature. But what I think back, and I think about that day, quite honestly, I think about we graduated high school that Friday. We drove down in limousines that the parents from our team put together, and so that all of us seniors got to drive down right after graduation on Friday night to Chattanooga that night in limos as a graduation present. And then so we played the semifinals that Saturday, and then the finals Sunday. So it was a heck of a weekend. And but like I was saying, as it turns out, my gift that I could continue on with, I was also a heck of a golfer too. And there's nothing that I miss more than having the ability to play golf. And I'm sure a lot of you guys, at least the guys, I know some of us watch golf and pay attention to it. But I got the chance to, as a junior golfer, play golf with Brant Snedeker. He went to NBA, and we got to play junior PGA tournaments together. So I certainly sit there and root for him on. You know, he was a year younger than me. And at a year younger than me in high school, he was a little bit better than me, as you might expect. I'm certainly not going to say that I was going to be playing PGA golf if I'd not had a car accident at 22. But I missed that opportunity, and that's always going to be with me. But getting back to it, my role on that team was to be the heart, and that's how I look at it. Now, a lot of us had heart, but I knew that I could wear it on my sleeve and just follow me. If there's times of doubt, follow me. We're going to get this together. We're going to get this done. We're going to do it together. And I'm very, very thankful that for whatever reason I had that in me, because, graduating high school and I accomplished that goal. And honestly, I didn't think much beyond that. I thought I knew, and I had an opportunity to go play soccer in college at Lambeth University. It's a Methodist school, and I got an opportunity. I had a soccer scholarship. I had a church scholarship. And quite frankly, when I got there, really all I was thinking about was, how am I going to make that next goal? How are we going to win the next championship? And as it turned out, that freshman year, we won a conference tournament. We won the conference tournament. We won the conference championship. We made it to the final 16. But I was missing a few things, that was my single-minded focus. It was very, very hard for me to wake up for those morning classes whenever I thought that every single night I was going to miss something. And I'm not saying I was doing anything wild or crazy, but at the same time, I was the last person to leave a get-together, a gathering, or whatever, because I didn't want to miss that conversation. And then that's going to be a very, very common thing for you guys at 18, 19 years old, is that every day you feel like you're going to miss something. And if I could have some advice, it'd just be to slow down, relax. If something that's going to happen on a Tuesday night, you can wait, you can study a little bit and so on, and kind of get yourself prepared for the day ahead as far as school and everything else. But that wasn't necessarily what my path was. So after spending that year at Lambeth, I had to reassess some things, because I got an A for playing soccer, but I didn't get very many other A's or anything else for that matter for that first semester. And it gave me an opportunity to kind of sit back. And then there were some things that it created turmoil, honestly, and I didn't know. So once I had that, everything had all been worked out. Everything up to that point was all kind of geared around my sports and things. And I definitely had some interest, and I certainly always loved politics and history and things like that line. So I'm not going to say that I wasn't in tune with studying as well, but my focus was that. And so a lot of times in life, you get, whether it's something that you've done or mistake or decisions you made, it recreates, it sets up a new situation for you where it wasn't maybe your original path or what you originally thought you were going to do. But each time something happens, there is a new path that creates itself. And so the best thing we can do is have faith in that. So whether it's something that's happened to you or something that you've done, mistakes or anything along that line, there's always going to be a new path. And you've always got that gift inside you to give. And I've kind of managed to find that out. And I'm a work in progress, like we all are. But 13 years post-accident, or post-injury, I think I'm in a pretty good place. And so I just kind of walked through that. There was probably between 18, I turned 19 that first semester at Lambeth, and probably between the age of 19 and 21 was searching for me. I was raised by my mom and my stepdad, and I had my dad on the other end of the country, and it was actually a motivating, one of the speeches I gave before one of our games my senior year was bringing that up, how important it was that my dad was going to be there for our graduation, and therefore if we continued to win, he was going to be there to see us play in the semis and the finals. And the very first game that I thought we had a chance to lose, it was in the semifinals of our district tournament. And I brought that up, and I was all in on that, right before that game. I said, guys, listen, you guys know that I didn't have my dad around as much as I would have liked to. He was all the way around the country, the other side of the country. But it's important to me. He's coming to our graduation, and I want him to see us play, and I want him to see us win the state championship. And that was, and to this day, guys on that team will come up to me and tell me how much they remember that, and I remember it too. I meant it with all my heart. I wanted that to happen, and it happened, of course. But part of that 2.5, 3 year kind of refining where to go, and this is before a car accident. I was already trying to search it out, and so I went out and I spent some time with him. I went out and moved there for about 5 months in San Francisco, and got to work with him and got to work with some folks and see another side of life that I just wasn't didn't have that experience. I didn't have that before them, but I took with me from that time period the opportunity to work alongside with some guys on the loading docks and some people from different ethnic backgrounds and everything else, and I was able to use that to this day, because I can always look back and I was like, oh man, I can relate to these people that I didn't necessarily grow up around or in the same environment of, but that have that opportunity to be there at that time. And really, it was just me wanting to have that time with my dad, but there was all these other things that I learned and got to see because of that trip. I came back home, and I thought I was going to get it lined up, and I went to Vol State and was going to start things rolling in the right direction. Well, I ended up meeting a girl, and she was from New Orleans. Well, some of my roots are from New Orleans, and I got a little ahead of myself. At 20 years old, decided to move down there, and still didn't have my education quite lined up yet, and she might have been a little bit older than me, and she had already had that part of her life planned out, or it was moving along, and I wasn't quite on the same level. But because of that, and it was really, and one of the things I'll keep going back to is no matter what, I always had a faith. I always had a faith that just to go and not have fear of thinking about second guessing decisions or anything, and that served me well. So my motivating factor was to go down there because this might have been an opportunity to have something special. Well, it was also, as it turned out, more than anything, it was an opportunity for me to retrace some of my roots, because both my dad was from New Orleans and my mom grew up there and there in East Texas, and I grew up here for the most part from about 10 years old in Hendersonville. Other than going back to visit family and everything, that was my opportunity to see where they grew up and kind of get connected with some of my dad's side of the family and so on, and that was kind of the last step I felt, or one of the last steps to kind of find a path for me. And so I ended up making one more journey to East Texas. I had a call from my great uncle who ran an oil field service company down there, and he said, hey, I know you're about 21 years old now, or about to be, and you still don't seem like you have a set path yet. So I got a proposition for you. Why don't you come down here, work for me, roughnecking it, if you will. Put in about half a year to a year, save up some money, pay off your student loans, pay off your debt that you've accrued over those 2 years that I'm talking about, and get yourself lined up. And that was a tough decision because, that was something, again, totally new to me. But I took the leap, said, you know what, I need to make that step. And so I did that. And because of moving down there, that was the final piece of the puzzle for me to get going and trying to move forward and figuring out that there's more than just playing golf and getting out and playing around and thinking that every day that you're going to miss something if you don't go to this party or you go to this rock concert or, festival or whatever. That was finally, it's like, well, the value of putting in that hard 10-hour day or getting up at the crack of dawn and working and then really assessing that value of, and having the ability to make that money and pay off my debts at the time. And then that gave me the opportunity to buy my own, to pay for my own tuition. So I started to go to school in East Texas, and I had a very good semester. It was actually the first semester that I had that was very, very good when I was 21 years old. I made all A's and B's. And I knew moving forward that, okay, I'm good. I was a little behind. It took me a little bit longer to get there, but now I've got it. I got it figured out. Well, sure enough, just when you think you got it figured out, after the first week of the second semester, the spring semester, and that would have been, January of 2002, I ended up having a car accident, which the result of that car accident left me paralyzed from the chest down, and I've got limited use of my hands. And, the damage to my spinal cord and my neck was significant. It was, I've got bone fragments in there, and so this is my life. This is the body and the physical abilities that I have, and from that point moving forward. So I'm 13 years later, but I can tell you, and Mike was there. He came to visit me in the hospital when I came back home, and you can imagine there's a lot of adjusting that you have to do. He was there, and I remember him visiting at the house, and I was, of course, as you can expect, going through some anger, some depression, of course, longing for at least to have the ability. You see people, whenever you're in go through rehab, and you get to see people walk in or roll in, actually come in, similar type situation, and you get to see them through the course of the 3 to 5 months that I was in rehabilitation in Atlanta. I got to see some people come in with similar type situation, and I got to see people walk out or in that process of regaining their strength because the damage to their spinal cord wasn't as significant as mine was. I put everything I had into working out, putting everything I had into trying to regain every ability that I could. And I thought, I prayed, of course, and I had God with me, and I know that. He's still with me. But as it turns out, it wasn't part of my path to get that opportunity to kind of heal back up. And in the same time, and ever since, I get to hear people who said, man, if you believe it, you can. And I said, well, yeah, I tell you what, I have faith. And I know that I've got a path and that God's with me. And there's still plenty for me to give. And as it turns out, there certainly is. But anyway, I had to deal with that. I had to come to grips with that. And I knew within probably about 6 months to a year that I wasn't going to regain the ability to walk or do a lot of the things that I wanted to do. And for somebody like myself who put so much emphasis, every part of my identity for me was, what can I do? That's really what I thought of. Now it turns out I was always way more than that, but that's what I focused in on. So then, for me, having this happen, honestly made my life a little bit simpler in a lot of ways. Because now it's like, what can I do? And I knew right away, I was kind of angry. More than anything, I was angry because I'd finally started doing well in school. All right, and then this happened. So this is a whole nother set of circumstances. But that was my motivating factor. I didn't want to be 22, 23 and still needed, however many years to graduate. I went back, as soon as I got back home, I got back into school as quick as possible. It got me in a routine. And I was able to do really well at Vol State for a couple years. Then I was able to move on to MTSU. Well, along the way, as I was, doing well in college, and I had a path, I knew no matter what, you're not going to slow me down. I'm going to get my degree, and I'm going to move forward from there. But I always look back, and just when we're watching that video right there, I still think about that. And what I think about is whenever I looked at my teammates, that look they gave me back in the eyes, I know that. And I know it. And so I look for that every day in my life, is that they looked at me, they had respect, they knew that I was with them, and they knew they could count on me. And so I will never forget that, and I take that with me every single day of my life, because I don't ever want to have to look at somebody in the eyes and them have doubt about where I'm coming from or who I am as a person. So I take that with me. So yes, I might have had a little misguided, putting way too much of it in on what I physically can do or so on. But like I said, the biggest gift that I had was the ability to kind of be the heart and pull people together. And I can do that from a wheelchair, and I still do that from a wheelchair. I ended up graduating from college, and because of my disability, even while I was in college, it got me linked up with lots of other people with disabilities. Got me linked up with people that I probably would never have thought about had it not been for my own situation. And because of that, it gives my life a great value. I got linked in with partners in policymaking within that first year after I graduated, which got me linked in with people or family members with people that have family members with people with disabilities. Got me linked in with understanding what resources are out there, what legislation was going on that was designed to help people with disabilities, and kind of be more aware of that. I got to do a congressional internship in Washington, D.C. that was sponsored by the American Association of People with Disabilities. And I got to spend a summer up there, only a year and a half, 2 years after my car accident. Again, that gave me another opportunity to get linked in with people with all sorts of types of disabilities that were still moving forward just fine. They're blind, they're people like myself with spinal cord injuries, people who are deaf, and we were all kind of together at George Washington University in the dorms, and we had lots of opportunities to share our experiences, share our trials and tribulations, and so for me, I took Partners in Policymaking. I took that internship and being connected with those other people with disabilities, and that was just part of my path. And to graduate from college, and because of being linked in, and I was a council member of the Council on Developmental Disabilities and other things, but it just got me linked in, and it was a world that I wasn't used to, but I was new to, but this was my world now, and so I ended up getting a job with the Center for Independent Living in Middle Tennessee, and I look back, I see Diana Gallagher, and that got me linked in with her, and Patrick Gallagher, if you guys, I'm sure you know the Gallagher family, and Diane is near and dear to my heart, as is Patrick. But so for almost 7 years, I worked at the Center for Independent Living, and with a purpose-driven life. I mean, I have ups and downs like we all do, and I have times, and Diana's seen it, and where I struggle with the day-to-day grind and so on, and we all will on one level or another. But knowing that I had that my work, working with people with their Social Security disability benefits and helping them out, helping them understand, how much they can earn and so on, and kind of help them with that. Having the opportunity to give disability sensitivity trainings and get linked in with lots of different people and use my voice as a platform to give understanding for others. That's been part of my path. And quite honestly, again, in the last year, I thought probably the only step forward you could do in that nonprofit organization was maybe to become executive director. And so I tried for that, and I didn't get it. And that was about a little over a year ago. And so they ended up hiring another person, and that was a letdown for me. And honestly, the last year at that job was kind of a struggle because saw some people that I knew and loved and worked with for a long time that left. I was struggling with the situation. I think I was burnt out. But because of not having the ability to get that position, struggling, yes, for that year, but ultimately I turned it into a motivating factor. I can't control what has happened, but what I can control is what I can do from here. And I started reaching out and trying to find opportunities. And one of the greatest blessings, and I can speak to it for me as a person with a disability, was the ability to drive again, to get linked up with a vehicle that I could get in and out of and drive with my hands and really get for me, it was a big piece of the puzzle to have that independence again. And so I'd been, I'd got my vehicle from Handicap Driver Services, or now it's Mobility Works. And so I'd been a long time client, I guess, of Mobility Works, it's come time just in the last few months to get a new vehicle for me. So I was going naturally through them to get lined up with a new van because I've had mine for about 10 years. And so just in that process, the general manager in Gallatin let me know that, hey, we're about to hire a salesperson. And I said, well, I'd be very, very interested in that. And so I applied and had a series of four interviews that drew out over a month and a half, too, and I didn't know whether I was going to get it. I started worrying to death. But I actually ended up getting that job, and I'm there now after about 2.5, 3 months. And again, now doing something that still has me connected with people, still getting them linked up with a product that allows them to have independence and move out. So, and I have so much passion about that. So I'm still, this is not the path that I had set for. So certainly at 18, 19 years old, I never thought that I would be sitting here with the series of events that's happened since then. But I can tell you with great faith that there's always a path forward. And one thing, I can ramble on and on, but what I'll leave with you is this, and we've heard it all from, we've heard the saying that everything happens for a reason. I don't necessarily like that. Now, I'm not going to break that one down too much, but I'll say this, that no matter what happens, good, bad, indifferent, everything, no matter what, each thing that happens, it creates a new set of circumstances. And no matter what happens, you still got a path. Every single thing that happens in your life, if you just stop, and things could be just spiraling out of control, just have that moment where you stop, say a prayer, put things in context, because every single step, God's there, He's with you, and there is going to be a new path, a path that's His, and just have faith in that. All right, and yes, I'm not going to sit up here and say that I don't long to play golf or do some of the things that I used to be able to do, but I have great faith in knowing that my life still has value, it still has purpose, and to the best of my ability, I'm going to still keep trying to walk through that. So as long as you kind of, no matter how things go, and especially with this day and age, there's so many distractions. There's plenty of distractions for me. There's plenty more for y'all. But just continue moving forward and just have that faith and trust that there's going to be a path and you can get there. And thank you. I'm a rambler, Mike. But
Terry, just a second.
yes, sir.
Oh, wow. Wow. Our theology is God doesn't will for accidents to happen that cause human beings the kind of suffering and limitation that Dylan has and is experiencing. But our theology is that God's will is that we become more aware of God's presence and love for us through those experiences like Dylan's.
Amen.
Again, in the scripture, we read things and they're just words until we see someone actually embody them. And we say, yeah, that's true because I see it, incarnated. That's the big word we Christians use, the incarnation of God in Jesus. John, will you put up the Romans 5? This is true because I see it. I see it in Dylan. Paul says, let us boast in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces